The mansion on Namsan Hill stood like a crown above Seoul, a fortress of marble and malice where every chandelier cost more than a surgeon's annual salary and every hallway whispered of disappeared enemies. This was the kingdom of Jae. His name alone could freeze police investigations mid-sentence and turn corporate negotiations into surrenders. The Hwarang syndicate answered to him. Politicians bowed to him. The entire city's underground economy flowed through accounts he controlled with the casualness of a man checking the weather. Tonight, he was restless. A weapons deal with a triad contact had collapsed into accusations and veiled threats. Blood would follow, it always did when respect was questioned. Jae paced through his palatial home, a cold monument to power built on the bones of those who'd challenged him, his mind already calculating casualties and retaliations. The mansion was silent except for the whisper of his footsteps on imported Italian marble. Then he heard it. Not the sound of an intruder. Not the carefully measured movements of his security team. Something else. Something that didn't belong. The soft, desperate sound of someone trying not to make noise. Coming from the private dining wing. Jae's hand moved automatically to the gun concealed beneath his jacket. His expression went flat, the look his enemies saw last. He moved with predatory silence through corridors lined with art worth millions, toward the source of the disturbance. No servant was permitted in the private dining area after midnight. That was a rule everyone knew. Rules in Jae's world weren't suggestions, they were the difference between employment and a body in the Han River. He rounded the corner into the dining wing and stopped. The sight before him made no sense at first. A small black girl, no older than 7, knelt beside the marble counter. Her thin arms trembled as she clutched a dinner roll, leftover from that evening's meal, scheduled for disposal, and tried to hide it inside her oversized sweater. Chicken scraps sat on a plate beside her, untouched but clearly intended as her next theft. Her name was Kemi. The moment she saw him, she froze completely. The bread slipped from her fingers, bouncing once on the polished floor before settling near her worn shoes. Her eyes went wide with pure, animal terror. Jae's presence filled the room like a storm front, silent, absolute, suffocating. He was a man who'd orchestrated executions over insults smaller than this. A man whose displeasure was a death sentence. "What," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk, "do you think you're doing?" Kemi's response was immediate and devastating. She dropped to her knees, small knees that hit the hard marble with a crack that echoed, and pressed her forehead to the floor. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out in a terrified rush. "I'm sorry. I wasn't stealing, I was just hungry. Please don't tell them. Please don't hurt my mommy." The word hungry landed differently than Jae expected. His jaw tightened. Theft in his home was unforgivable. Entering forbidden areas was unforgivable. Yet something about her trembling body, the way her thin arms barely held her weight, the hollow sound of her breathing, made him pause. "Stand up," he commanded, his voice still cold but fractionally less lethal. She rose slowly, shaking so badly she could barely keep her balance. Tears streamed down her face, creating tracks through dust she'd accumulated from hiding in small spaces. Jae studied her with the same analytical precision he used to identify weaknesses in rival organizations. But this wasn't a rival. This was a child. And she was thin, not just skinny, but starving. Sunken cheeks. Visible ribs beneath her threadbare clothing. Eyes too large for her face. "Who is your mother?" he asked. "My mommy is Taiwo," Kemi whispered, her voice barely audible. "She cleans the West Wing. She doesn't know I came here. Please don't punish her. This is my fault. Only mine." The name registered instantly. Taiwo was one of the most invisible members of his household staff, always bowed, always silent, always working. He'd probably looked directly at her 100 times without actually seeing her. "You live in this house," Jae said, his eyes narrowing. "You see food prepared every day. Meals for staff. Why are you eating garbage meant for disposal?" Kemi hesitated. Her lips trembled. Her small hands twisted together in a gesture that looked practiced, the body language of someone accustomed to making herself smaller. "They said." She swallowed hard. "They said I'm not allowed to eat the staff meals anymore. They said I don't belong in the dining hall. They said I..." I make the other workers uncomfortable. Something cold and dangerous slid down on Jay's spine. Who said that? She shook her head violently, terror flashing brighter in her eyes. Please don't make me say. Please. Hill, she stopped herself, but the damage was done. Hill. Jay knelt slowly, lowering himself to her eye level, something he'd never done for anyone. His expensive suit creased on the marble floor, but he didn't care. Look at me, he said, his voice still carrying command but stripped of its threat. No one will hurt you. Tell me who. Kemi's whole body shook. She looked at him, really looked, searching his face for the trap, for the trick. Finding only intensity and something she didn't recognize, genuine attention. Sung-ho, she whispered, the name barely more than breath. The air in the room changed. Sung-ho. The mansion's internal operations supervisor. A man Jay had trusted to run his household with the same precision he ran his criminal empire. A man who handled staff discipline, resource allocation, and daily operations. A man who was now, Jay realized with crystallizing clarity, dead. Show me your arms, Jay said quietly. Kemi's eyes went wide. She took a step back. Show me, he repeated, and this time it wasn't a request. Slowly, with trembling hands, she pulled up the sleeves of her thin sweater. Jay felt something crack inside his chest. Bruises. Dark purple and blue fingerprints circled both her upper arms. Some were fresh. Others were fading to yellow, evidence of repeated, systematic abuse. They disappeared under her clothing, suggesting more he couldn't see. His hands curled into fists so tight his knuckles went white. In 20 years of running the Warring Syndicate, Jay had orchestrated violence that would make hardened criminals vomit. He'd burned businesses, disappeared rivals, broken men who'd crossed him. But all of it, had been part of a code. Rules. A structure where betrayal met consequences and respect was currency. This was rot. This was corruption inside his own walls. This was someone using his authority, his household, his resources to torture a child. Did anyone else touch you? His voice was barely above a whisper now, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. Kemi nodded, fresh tears spilling over. They hit me when I tried to take leftover bread last week, she said, her voice breaking. They said I was dirty. They said I didn't deserve food from this house. They said people like me, she couldn't finish. People like me. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Jay stood slowly. The dining wing felt colder. The crystal chandelier overhead seemed to dim. Every expensive surface, every piece of imported furniture, every symbol of his wealth suddenly looked obscene against the reality of this starving, beaten child. He pulled out his phone and made a call. When he spoke, his voice was utterly empty of emotion, the tone his organization had learned to fear more than rage. Bring Taiwo to the main hall. Now. She's not in trouble. And someone finds Sung-ho. Tell him I need to see him immediately. Don't tell him why. He looked down at Kemi, who was still shaking, still terrified. Come with me, he said, and his voice had changed again, not warm, but no longer a threat. You're going to eat. Real food. Not garbage. If you're wondering what happens when the most feared man in Seoul discovers that cruelty has been hiding in his own home, when a mafia boss's empire is forced to confront the monster it created, you need to keep watching. Because what Jay does next will rewrite everything you thought you knew about power, protection, and redemption. The plate slipped from Kemi's trembling fingers. It hit the marble floor with a sharp crack. Leftover bread rolls scattered across the pristine surface. A piece of chicken skidded toward Jay's expensive shoes. The little girl's legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, hands flying up instinctively, palms out, as if she could physically push away what was coming. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't stealing, I was just hungry. Please don't tell them. Please. Her voice cracked with pure terror. Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling down her hollow cheeks in silent streams. His jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him. Theft was theft. Disrespect was disrespect. In his world, violations inside his own home were dealt with swiftly. Yet something about the scene before him, this trembling child, her sunken cheeks, her bony wrists, made him pause. His eyes traveled from her tear-stained face to the scattered food on the floor. Scraps. Leftovers meant for disposal. Things his kitchen staff would have thrown away without a second thought. "Stand up," he ordered, his voice cutting through her sobs. Kemi struggled to her feet, shaking so violently she could barely balance. Her arms wrapped around herself protectively, and she kept her eyes fixed on the floor, terrified to meet his gaze. Anjay moved closer, and she flinched. "Who is your mother?" The question came out colder than he intended. "And my mommy is Taiwo," Kemi whispered. "She cleans the West Wing. She doesn't know I came here. Please don't punish her. It's not her fault. I was so hungry." Taiwo. The name registered instantly. One of the quietest workers. Always bowed. Always silent. A ghost who moved through his household cleaning up after his world of excess. He studied the child again. Really looked at her this time. The hollows under her eyes. The gaunt cheeks. The stick-thin arms. This wasn't a child sneaking extra treats. This was starvation in his house. "You live here," Anjay said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "You see food every day. Why are you hungry?" Kemi's lips trembled. Her small hands twisted together nervously. "Hello friends, you've watched this far. Don't be one of those people who enjoy and disappear. Subscribe, like, and let me know where you're watching from. This channel survives because of people like you, so please subscribe, like, and join the family. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Let's continue our amazing story." They said I'm not allowed to eat the staff meals anymore." Her voice was barely audible. "They said I don't belong." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Anjay's expression darkened, his features hardening into something cold and lethal. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Who said that?" Kemi shook her head violently, fresh tears spilling down her face. "Please don't make me say. Please. They'll hurt me again." She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in horror at what she'd just revealed. Anjay crouched down, lowering himself to her eye level. The movement was deliberate, controlled. When he spoke, his voice was calmer, but there was steel beneath it. "Look at me." Slowly, fearfully, Kemi raised her eyes to meet his. "No one will hurt you," he said. Each word was a promise. A vow. "You have my word. Now tell me. Who did this?" The child's entire body trembled. She glanced at the doorway as if expecting someone to appear and punish her for speaking. Then, in a voice so small it was almost swallowed by the silence, she whispered. "Sung-ho." The air shifted. Everything changed in that single moment. Sung-ho. The mansion's internal operations supervisor. The man Anjay had personally selected to maintain discipline among the staff. Trusted. Untouchable. The person responsible for ensuring his household ran like a well-oiled machine. Anjay stood up slowly, his movements controlled but radiating barely contained fury. The room felt colder now. More dangerous. Because the most feared man in the city had just learned that rot existed inside his walls, and it had a name. Anjay remained perfectly still. Then he moved. He knelt down slowly until he was at Kemi's eye level. The action was so unexpected that confusion flickered across her tear-stained face. "Did he touch you?" Anjay asked, his voice quiet but edged with something dark. "Did Sung-ho put his hands on you?" Kemi nodded, barely perceptible. "Show me." Her small fingers trembled as she pulled back the sleeve of her oversized sweater. The bruises were unmistakable. Dark purple and blue fingerprints wrapped around her thin upper arm like a cruel bracelet. More marks disappeared under the fabric. His hands curled into fists, knuckles white. "How long?" he asked through gritted teeth. 3 weeks. Since Mommy asked if I could eat with the staff. The rage building inside him was white-hot. But he kept his face calm. He couldn't terrify the child further. He stood and pulled out his phone, pressing a single number. "Bring Taiwo to the private dining wing. Now." Taiwo arrived within minutes, still in her cleaning uniform, eyes wide with panic. The moment she saw Kemi standing beside Jae, her face drained of color. Her legs buckled. She dropped to the marble floor, hands pressed together. "I'm sorry, sir. Please punish me. I'll leave tonight. Just please don't hurt her." "Stop," Jae commanded. Taiwo froze, tears streaming down her face. "Look at your daughter's arm." With shaking hands, Taiwo reached for Kemi, pulling her close. When she saw the bruises, a sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. Her fingers traced the marks gently, disbelief and horror warring on her face. "Who did this?" she whispered, though her eyes already knew. "Tell her," Jae said to Kemi. The little girl's voice was small but steady now. "Sung-ho hit me when I tried to take leftover bread last week. He said I was dirty. He said I didn't belong." She paused, fresh tears welling. "He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure Mommy lost her job and we'd have nowhere to go." Taiwo pulled her daughter close, shoulders shaking. "They wouldn't let her eat with the staff anymore," Kemi continued. "They said she was just a cleaner's child. That she wasn't supposed to be here." Jae felt something crack inside his chest. This wasn't just cruelty. This was systematic abuse. Rot that had festered beneath his pristine world, rot that existed because he had been too consumed by his empire to see it. He had built a fortress of fear where every rule was obeyed. And right under his nose, a child had been starved and beaten. His authority hadn't just been challenged. It had been corrupted. The rage he felt wasn't cold or calculated. This was primal. Protective. A fury that burned hotter because it was mixed with shame. He had failed. Not as a crime lord. As a human being. He looked at Taiwo, still clutching her daughter, both of them terrified despite everything. They were afraid of him, the man who should have protected them. "Stand up," he said, his voice softer now. Taiwo struggled to her feet, keeping Kemi close. "Go to the East Guest Wing. Food will be brought to you. Real food. Tomorrow, we will discuss how this household will change." Taiwo's eyes filled with tears, but no words came. Jae turned away, pulling out his phone again. His thumb hovered over the contact name for only a second before he pressed it. The call connected. "Sung-ho," Jae said, his voice as cold as winter death. "Come to the private dining wing. Immediately." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Sung-ho arrived within 10 minutes. He walked in with the confident stride of a man who had never been questioned. His tailored vest was immaculate, his expression calm. He had supervised this household for 3 years without incident. He expected another routine matter. What he found was Jae standing in the center of the room, radiating cold fury. "You summoned me, sir?" Sung-ho said, bowing slightly. Jae didn't respond immediately. He simply watched the man, studying him with the same calculating gaze he used to assess enemies before eliminating them. "Tell me about the staff meal policy," Jae said, his voice dangerously quiet. Sung-ho straightened, confused. "All staff receive 3 meals daily, sir. Standard procedure." "All staff?" "Yes, sir." Jae took a step forward. "Then explain why a 7-year-old child has been denied food for 3 weeks. The color drained from Sung-ho's face. I don't understand." "Kemi. Taiwo's daughter. Explain why she was told she doesn't belong. Why she was denied meals. Why she was reduced to stealing scraps at midnight." Sung-ho's professional mask cracked. "Sir, the child is not official staff. I was maintaining household standards. The staff meals are for employees, not their dependents. Show him your arm." Kemi stepped forward from the doorway, Taiwo's hand on her shoulder. She pulled back her sleeve. Sung-ho stared at the bruises, his face ashen. "I was enforcing discipline. The child was disrupting workflow. This is a professional household. You hit her." 3 words. Flat. Final. "I was preventing theft. You hit a child." The room went cold. Sung-ho stepped backward. Jae moved. One moment he was 5 feet away. The next, he was inches from Sung-ho's face. You told her she was dirty. You denied her food. And when she took leftovers, scraps meant for disposal, you put your hands on her. Sung-ho trembled. I was maintaining order. In my house. Under my roof. Using my authority. Jae stepped back, his expression colder than ice. Professionals who abuse children don't remain employed. He pulled out his phone. Security. Private dining wing. Now. Sung-ho's composure shattered. Sir, please, I've served you for 3 years. You created a system where a child could be brutalized while I remained ignorant. That ends now. 2 security guards entered, their faces carefully neutral. Escort Mr. Sung-ho off the premises, Jae commanded. He is no longer employed here. He takes nothing but his personal effects. And make it clear, if I hear his name connected to harm against any child, anywhere in this city, there will not be a second conversation. The guards moved forward. Sung-ho's face twisted with desperation. You're destroying me over a maid's child. Jae's hand shot out, grabbing Sung-ho's collar with such sudden violence that the man stumbled. Their faces were inches apart. Her name, Jae said, his voice deadly calm, is Kemi. And you will never speak of her again. He released Sung-ho with enough force to send him stumbling backward into the guard's grip. They dragged him away, his protests echoing down the marble corridor until they faded into silence. Jae stood alone in the center of the dining wing, his hands still clenched into fists, his breathing carefully controlled. The rot had been cut out. But the damage remained. He turned to find Kemi and Taiwo still standing in the doorway, watching him with identical expressions of stunned disbelief. For the first time in his life, the most feared man in the city felt uncertain. Not about what he'd done. About what came next. Rot was about to be cut out. The silence that followed Sung-ho's removal was absolute. Jae stood in the center of the dining wing, hands still clenched. He had eliminated threats before. Removed problems. Erased obstacles. But this felt different. He turned to face Kemi and Taiwo, still in the doorway. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear and wonder. Taiwo looked ready to bolt. They were terrified of him. You're not in trouble, he said quietly. Taiwo flinched, pulling Kemi closer. Jae took a step forward, stopping when they tensed. He'd never had to move carefully around anyone before. Never had to consider that his presence alone could be a weapon. The East Guest Wing has been prepared for you. Both of you. Taiwo's eyes widened. Sir, we can't, that's for VIP guests. Not anymore. But I'm just a cleaner. You're Kemi's mother. That's enough. Taiwo's tears came suddenly. She looked at her daughter, then back at him, confusion and desperate hope on her face. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this? Jae looked at Kemi, this small child who had been beaten and starved under his roof while he remained blind. Because I should have protected you both. You lived in my house. That made you my responsibility. I failed. The words felt foreign. He had built an empire on never admitting fault. But looking at that bruised arm, none of that mattered. Kemi stepped forward suddenly, breaking from her mother's grip. She moved toward him with fearless honesty. Are you going to hurt us? She asked. No. Are you going to make us leave? No. She studied his face. Then why do you look so scary? Despite everything, something almost like a smile threatened to surface. That's just how I look. Oh. She considered this. Mommy says people who look scary are sometimes just sad inside. The observation struck him silent. Taiwo looked mortified. Kemi, you can't. She's right, Jae said quietly. He knelt down to Kemi's level for the second time that night. This time, she didn't flinch. No one in this house will ever deny you food again. No one will ever hurt you. And if they try, they'll answer to me. Understand? Kemi nodded. He stood, turning to Taiwo. Tomorrow, things will change. Tonight, you eat real food and sleep somewhere warm and safe. Sir, this is too much. It's not enough. It will never be enough to make up for what happened. But it's a start. Taiwo's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled as she pulled Kemi close, her shoulders shaking with relief. Jae looked away, pulling out his phone. Kitchen. I need a meal sent to the East Guest Wing. Everything. The best you have. For a woman and child. He paused. And warm milk and something sweet for the girl. He ended the call. Come. I'll show you to your room. They followed through marble corridors to the East Guest Wing, a different world entirely. When Jae opened the door, Taiwo stopped breathing. Sunlight would flood these rooms in the morning. The furniture was elegant but comfortable. The smaller bedroom had fresh linens and a basket of books and toys. This can't be for us, Taiwo whispered. It is. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the rest. School for Kemi. Medical care. A new position for you, not as a cleaner. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If either of you needs anything, call me directly. Not a supervisor. Me. He left before they could respond. In the hallway, alone, Jae finally exhaled. For the first time in 20 years, he felt the weight of something other than power. Responsibility. And it terrified him more than any enemy ever had. The next morning, Kemi woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, warm and golden, pouring through windows overlooking gardens she'd never known existed. She sat up in the softest bed she'd ever felt. Then she remembered. Taiwo was already awake, staring at her hands. Did we really sleep here? Kemi asked. Taiwo nodded, unable to speak. A knock came at the door. Taiwo tensed, but found a kind-faced woman in medical scrubs. Good morning. Mr. An sent me. I'm Dr. Park. I'm here to examine Kemi. Taiwo looked stunned. A doctor? For my daughter? Yes. May I come in? While Dr. Park examined Kemi, Jae sat in his office making calls that had nothing to do with his criminal empire. I need the best pediatrician in Seoul. For ongoing care. A child who's been neglected. His assistant, Min-jun, stood nearby, watching with barely concealed confusion. And contact the International School of Seoul. I want a meeting with their admissions director. Today. Sir, Min-jun ventured, may I ask what this is regarding? A child will be enrolling. She'll need tutors. Arrange it. The child's name? Kemi. Taiwo's daughter. Min-jun's eyes widened. The entire staff had been buzzing since Sung-ho's removal. I'll also need a child psychologist. Someone who specializes in trauma. He made call after call. Social workers. Educational consultants. Employment lawyers. Min-jun watched his boss systematically dismantle every barrier between a neglected child and a real future. Sir, if I may, Min-jun said quietly. This is unexpected. Jae set down his phone. What is? You've never invested this kind of attention in personal matters. A child was beaten and starved under my roof. This household failed. I failed. That ends now. Min-jun nodded. What do you need? Every staff member will be interviewed. Anyone who knew about Kemi's situation and did nothing will be terminated. Anyone who participated faces legal consequences. Understood. And Taiwo's status changes today. She's household coordinator now. Quadruple her salary. Her job is ensuring Kemi's well-being. She reports to me. Yes, sir. Jae walked to the window. I also want a full review of household policies. Staff treatment, compensation. If others are suffering, I need to know. Min-jun hesitated. The syndicate heads will see this as softness. Jae turned, his expression dangerous. Let them try to exploit it. They'll discover that protecting something makes a man more dangerous, not less. Min-jun saw the shift then. This wasn't weakness. This was Jae claiming responsibility the way he claimed power. I'll make the arrangements, Min-jun said, bowing before leaving. That afternoon, Jae found himself in the East Wing suite with a stack of documents. Taiwo and Kemi were eating lunch, real food, served on fine china. Kemi's eyes kept widening at each new dish. "We need to talk," Jae said. Taiwo set down her fork, fear flickering. "You're not in trouble. This is about your future." He laid out the documents. Enrollment papers. Medical plans. A new employment contract. "I don't expect you to trust this immediately. But I'm making you a promise. This isn't temporary. Kemi will have every opportunity. And you'll have resources to be her mother, not my servant." Taiwo's hands shook. "Why would you do this?" Jae looked at Kemi, happily eating, her bruised arms already healing. "Because someone should have done it long ago. And I have the power to make it happen." "Nothing is that simple," Taiwo said softly. "You're right. But this will be." He stood to leave, then paused. "If you need anything, you have my direct number now. Use it." For the first time, Taiwo smiled. Small, uncertain, but real. Jae left feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. 3 weeks later, everything had changed. Kemi sat in Jae's car, clutching a new backpack decorated with stars. Her school uniform was crisp and clean. The bruises on her arms had faded to yellow-green shadows. Taiwo sat beside her, dressed in professional clothes, a blouse and slacks that made her look like someone who belonged in offices, not storage closets. "Are you nervous?" Jae asked, glancing at Kemi in the rearview mirror. She nodded. "The teachers know you're catching up. No one expects perfection. Just effort. What if the other kids don't like me?" Jae pulled up to the International School of Seoul, an elegant building with manicured lawns and uniformed children streaming through the gates. He turned to face her. "Then they're not worth your time. You're smart. You're kind. You survived things those children can't imagine. That makes you stronger." Kemi's eyes widened. "And if anyone gives you trouble, you tell me." Taiwo touched his arm. "Sir, you can't threaten 7-year-olds. I wasn't threatening the children." Despite her nerves, Kemi smiled. The apartment came together slowly. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, small but warm, with windows that let in natural light and doors that locked from the inside. Taiwo stood in the doorway the first day, staring. "This is ours?" "Yes. Lease is in your name. Paid for the year." "A year?" "To start." He had spent the afternoon helping them move in. The most feared man in Seoul, assembling furniture. He didn't mind. He knelt in Kemi's bedroom, wrestling with desk instructions. Kemi handed him screws and bolts. "This piece goes here." "You're right." He attached the leg. "You're good at this." She beamed. Taiwo watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. She'd enrolled in healthcare training starting next month. Her salary meant she could focus on learning without the weight of survival. For the first time in years, she could breathe. That evening, after the furniture was assembled, Jae prepared to leave. Taiwo stopped him at the door, pulling out a small envelope. Inside was the emergency card. "I can't keep this. You've done so much already." "Keep it," Jae interrupted. "Sir." "Taiwo. Emergencies don't announce themselves. Keep the card. Use it when you need it. That's not charity. That's insurance." She stared at the card, then at him. "Why? Why would you trust me with this? Why do any of this?" Jae was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks ago, I found a child eating scraps in my kitchen. I realized I had built an empire but couldn't protect one little girl under my own roof. That failure showed me what I'd become." He looked to where Kemi was arranging books, humming softly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I have to live with myself. And I can't do that knowing I had the power to change your life and chose not to." Taiwo's composure shattered. She pressed the card to her chest and sank against the doorframe, shoulders shaking with sobs. Not despair this time, but overwhelming gratitude. Jae stood awkwardly, uncertain. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you for seeing us. He nodded, then turned to leave. The first day of school is Monday. I'll pick you both up at 7:30. You don't have to. I know. He left before she could say more. Outside, Anjay stood by his car, looking back at the apartment building. Light glowed from the second-floor window, Kemi's room. He could see her shadow moving behind the curtains. For the first time in his adult life, he had built something instead of destroying it. And it terrified him how much it mattered. 6 months later, Kemi stood on stage at the international school, reciting a poem about courage. Her voice was clear and steady. In the audience, Taiwo sat in the third row, her healthcare certification in her purse. She had a job now, real employment with benefits. Beside her sat Anjay, his expensive suit out of place among casual parents. Everyone knew who he was. But none knew he'd cleared his afternoon to be here. Or that he'd helped Kemi practice every Sunday. When Kemi finished, Anjay stood, clapping louder than anyone else. Kemi saw him and beamed. The visits had become routine. Every Sunday, Anjay arrived with groceries and whatever Kemi wanted, books, art supplies, a winter coat. Today, he brought ingredients for dinner. You don't have to cook for us, Taiwo said. I know. But I want to. The crime lord who had ordered executions now taught a 7-year-old to season rice. Like this? Kemi asked. Perfect. Taiwo watched, amazed. The cold man who caught Kemi stealing now laughed when she dropped an egg. It's okay, he said. Happens to everyone. After dinner, they watched Kemi draw her classroom. She's doing well, Taiwo said. Her teachers say she's caught up. Some subjects, ahead. And you? How's the clinic? Good. The work is hard but it feels real. You are building something. Silence. Do you ever regret it? Taiwo asked. Anjay considered carefully. No. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret that it took finding a starving child to realize how broken my world was. He looked at his hands that had built an empire on violence. I spent 20 years believing power was everything. That compassion was weakness. He glanced at Kemi. I was wrong. Late that night, Anjay sat in his car. His phone buzzed. Shipments. Territories. Disputes. But all he could think about was Kemi's poem. Courage is being scared but doing it anyway. Courage is being kind even when the world is mean. Simple words. But they cut deeper than any threat. He thought about his empire, built believing it made him powerful. But helping a little girl with homework had given him something his empire never did. Purpose. Peace. Connection. He could continue as he was, keeping this pocket of goodness separate. Or he could change everything. The choice terrified him. Because changing meant dismantling the only identity he'd known for 2 decades. It meant becoming someone new. But then he remembered Kemi's bruised arms. Her hollow cheeks. Her fear. And the light in her eyes today when she'd seen him in the audience. His phone buzzed again. Violence brewing, authority questioned. Anjay stared at the screen, then made a decision. He began typing. Schedule a meeting with my lawyers. All of them. I want to discuss legitimate business transitions. The response, sir? You heard me. We begin dismantling the illegal operations. Find legal alternatives. I want exit strategies for everyone who wants out. His second-in-command called. Boss, what's going on? Change. Long overdue. This is about the kid, isn't it? Anjay looked at Kemi's glowing window. Yes. A 7-year-old showed me what I'd become. I refuse to be that man anymore. He ended the call. For 20 years, he'd tested people, looking for proof that his father's cynical view was correct. Then a starving child didn't steal everything. She took scraps. When caught, she protected her mother instead of herself. She hadn't just passed his test. She'd rewritten everything he believed about strength, power, and what it meant to matter. Anjay started the car, but looked at the apartment one more time. He'd saved a child. But the truth was simpler and more profound. She'd saved him first. 1 year later. Jae stood at the window of Taiwo's apartment, now a 3-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Below, he watched Taiwo and Kemi plant flowers. Kemi's laughter carried up, bright and uninhibited. She looked like any other 8-year-old. Happy. Safe. Whole. The bruises were gone. The fear was gone. The sound pierced Jae's chest. He turned from the window and sat on the couch. Min-jun reviewed documents for the business transition. 6 months of legal work had transformed his criminal empire into legitimate enterprises. The last routes transfer next week. You're officially out. Jae nodded. You never told her the truth, did you? Min-jun asked. That her suffering made me human? That you chose to change? Some truths are too heavy. That evening, after Kemi was asleep, Jae and Taiwo sat on the balcony with tea. The city sprawled below them. Jae had once viewed it as a kingdom to control. Now it just looked like people trying to survive. I need to tell you something, he said. Taiwo looked at him, concerned. My father raised me to believe people are fundamentally selfish. That compassion is weakness. That given unlimited resources, people would take everything and still want more. Taiwo listened. When I found Kemi that night, something in me wanted to test that belief. To prove my father right. He looked at her directly. So I watched. I waited to see what you would do. You were testing us? Yes. I expected greed. Proof that my father's cynicism was justified. And instead? Instead, I found a woman who used every opportunity to build a future, not take handouts. Who never asked for more than she needed. He stood, unable to sit with the weight. I tested you. And you passed in ways I never imagined. But you tested me. You showed me what I'd become. And you proved my entire life wrong. Taiwo was quiet for a moment. Are you asking for forgiveness? I don't deserve it. She stood beside him at the railing. My daughter was starving. You fed her. She was hurt. You protected her. She had no future. You gave her one. She looked up at him. I don't care why you started. I care that you didn't stop. I tested you like an experiment. And I would have failed any test that mattered if you hadn't been there. Monsters don't change. Monsters don't spend a year cooking Sunday dinners and attending school plays. Tears threatened at Jae's vision. Your father taught you that wealth without compassion is power. But he was wrong. Wealth without compassion is emptiness. You had everything, money, control, fear. But you were empty. Kemi filled that emptiness. Jae closed his eyes. I spent 20 years building an empire. And a 7-year-old eating dog food destroyed it in one night. She didn't destroy it. She rebuilt you. Through the window, Kemi's night light glowed softly. I gave her access to everything I had, Jae whispered, trying to prove my father right. And she proved my entire life wrong. Taiwo took his hand. Then she saved you twice. Once from your empire. Once from yourself. Jae looked at their joined hands. Thank you for not taking everything. For being proof that my father was wrong. For letting me be part of this. Taiwo smiled. You didn't give us a home, Jae. We gave you one. Standing on that balcony, overlooking a city he no longer wanted to control, Jae finally understood. Power hadn't made him strong. Compassion had. And the test he designed for a desperate woman had become the test that finally measured his own worth. She hadn't just passed. She'd rewritten the question entirely. Before you go, if this story touched you even a little, don't leave without subscribing. It really helps this channel grow. Thank you.